Well, last week in part one of our Sunday message series, Simple Southern Spirituality, the Thanksgiving edition, we were all dressed up and ready to go as the belle of the Butterball. And so today we are going to conclude this little two-parter with my talk that's titled, What's Left Over After the Leftovers? Now, I get it. I really, really do. You know, just when you thought you were so stuffed you could not possibly have another bite, now you find yourself staring at the refrigerator that is just packed full of leftovers, at least for a couple of days, right? Don't go more than 4 days. Do we agree to that? Yeah. I think that's the rule. This is why one of my really good friends, Charlie, who lives in Atlanta, he does Leftover Friday every year, the day after Thanksgiving. I was thinking we should try this next year at GLC. It would be so much fun. It's actually become an annual festivity. So here's what happens. Like between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., people come by his home, and they bring one of their favorite leftover dishes. So it basically becomes like Thanksgiving Take Two. I mean, wouldn't that be great fun to just taste everybody's like family recipes? Now, I don't know about you, but I have noticed that most of the time, these holiday dishes are actually more delicious the second time around. Anybody? Well, and of course, it turns out that there's some science behind this, why leftovers are so good the second time around. It has something to do, now you can go to the Food Network and hear all about this, I'm sure, but it has something to do with like the way all of the flavors have more time to blend together. So if you went the traditional route this year, and I understand that not everybody does turkey as the main dish, I get that. But if you did go the more traditional route this year, then you might also be experimenting with some new dishes with those leftovers. Like you might be making turkey pot pie or turkey tetrazzini, or you might even be doing sweet potato hash. Anybody? Or you might just throw it all in one big casserole like our Baptist brothers and sisters do, right? I mean, they definitely have the corner on that, yeah. But here's the thing, okay? Here is the thing, okay? There is a deeper reason why these Thanksgiving leftovers are so scrumptious. And since you're probably not going to hear it from Ina Garten or Bobby Flay, your minister is going to tell you why. Now, first, I just want to say that I'm sorry for being the buzzkill. But the reason that leftovers are so irresistible is because of dopamine. Yes, dopamine. You know, those little neurotransmitters that just say, please, sir, I'll have some more, right? Those little chemical messages go right to your brain. It's dope. That's what's for Thanksgiving dinner, right? Like dopamine and leftovers also, evidently. Now, I know that this information is a lot less bon appetit and a lot more, this is your brain on drugs, right? I get that. But the spiritual life is not a theory. It must be lived. In other words, it's just like our fifth unity principle teaches that it's not enough to know all these things. You have to actually do them, right? It works. There you go. So what's left over after all those delicious leftovers are left over? What's left over? You. It's you, boo. It's always you. It's always been you. It's you. Why? Because wherever you go, you know, no matter what you eat, no matter what you drink, no matter what you smoke, no matter what you buy, wherever you go, there you are. So, now that December is pretty much upon us, and we'll get to really, enjoy fall for 2 days, this means, of course, that the Godiva chocolates and the divinity candy and the sugar cookies are well on their way. So I want to share a spiritual recipe with you that I learned just recently from watching this great little documentary on Netflix called Secrets of the Blue Zones. Has anybody seen this? Just loved it, right? So I say spiritual recipe because this is a spiritual lesson that you can apply to your spiritual practice. Now, if you're not familiar with the blue zones are these places that have been discovered around the world, and they've been studied to show that these are areas where people live longer, they're happier, and they are a heck of a lot healthier. So, for instance, in Japan, and I just think this is so cool. In Japan, the Okinawans repeat a 2,500-year-old mantra. 2,500-year-old mantra. So it's not new, right? It's tried and true. They repeat this mantra before they eat. And the mantra is Hara Hachibu. Hara Hachibu. Hara Hachibu, right? Before each meal to help remind them to be mindful of what they're eating and how they eat. And more importantly, it is to remind them to stop eating when they're about 80% full. I mean, isn't that a great practice? Hara Hachibu. I know you want to say it, so let's just say it together. Hara Hachibu. Hara Hachibu. Hara Hachibu. Isn't that beautiful? It's beautiful. Now, as a card-carrying, sassy Sagittarian, I am so inspired by this that I actually started practicing this mantra. Now, I waited till after the cornbread and the sweet potato souffle, so it's only been 2 days, but I have actually started practicing this. What I know to be true is that in my heart of hearts, these last couple of years, especially now that I'm well over 60, if I don't listen to those whispers, right? If I don't listen to the messages that my body is giving me, they will become cosmic 2x4s, right? And I can honestly say that it's getting a little harder. I think it has to do with neuroplasticity in our brains, but not impossible, but it's becoming more and more challenging, to quit something cold turkey, right? Like I did in my younger years when I quit smoking, right? Or like when I quit drinking soda. Now, I mean, you can't imagine this in me probably, but like in my former career as a film and television producer, I drank so many Diet Cokes every day. They gave me my own recycle bin at my desk. Right? But I quit that cold turkey, I think, in 2009. And I quit eating red meat. Now, occasionally I do have it, every now and then, but I just no red meat for like 2 years at least, right? But it's getting a little trickier to like just quit cold turkey things. Now, I get it, I really do, because I myself hear some of these inner whispers that are asking, isn't it just time to lighten up a little bit, right? Isn't it time to just lighten up maybe, emotionally, physically, spiritually, right? So I'm going to shift gears here for a few minutes. I'm going to share a story with you about an elderly man who had lunch every day at the same local diner. And he would always order the same thing off the menu, which was soup and 2 slices of bread. So when the waitress would ask, well, how'd you enjoy your meal? He would always say, oh, it was good. It was really good, but, there could be more bread. So one day, the cook says to the waitress, you know what, tomorrow, he's such a good customer, why don't you give him 4 slices? So she did, and of course, when she asked how it was, he said it was delicious, but there could be more bread. So the next day, they gave him 6 slices, same thing, could be more bread. Next day, they give him the whole loaf. And of course, soup is delicious, but you know what? There could be more bread. So the cook gets an idea, and he calls the local bakery and has the bakery create this 6-foot-long loaf of bread. So he comes in, he orders as usual, and the waitress says, so, how was your lunch? Oh my gosh, the soup was delicious, right? But because she had split it down the middle, right? He's like, but I couldn't help but notice you just went back to serving 2 slices of bread. So here are some questions for you to marinate on, right? When is enough enough? Let's just say that together. When is enough enough, right? Like, when do you know that it's time for you to shift your consciousness about what is enough? And how do you transform your thinking from not enoughness? Amen? So here's the thing, when you hear me say things like, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind, and you have to mind your mind, and you have to train your brain. When you hear me say these things, it is a full-time job. It is a full-time job, and it's an inside job, especially when you've got, not your friend, when you have dopamine knocking at your door. Are you with me? So I want to remind you now of one of my favorite metaphors. Some of you have heard this. Some of you, this will be new for you. It's one of my favorite metaphors for how you can understand your levels of consciousness. And it comes from one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Carolyn Mays. Now, this particular analogy is all about a 12-story building. So imagine, if you will, that you live in a 12-story building and you're on the first floor, but you couldn't actually leave that floor. So all you would know is what you could see outside of your window, which is not very much. It would be a very limited point of view. I mean, you might be able to see some of the things that are happening on your block. That would be it. That would be your first floor perception. But if you went up to the second floor, you'd see a little bit more. If you went up to the third floor, you'd see a little bit more. If you went up to the fourth floor, you'd see a little bit more. And if you went up to the top floor, you would have a penthouse panoramic view of the city. In other words, from this perspective, you could see the whole skyline of the city. But you would never have been able to know that or see that from the first floor perception. Are you with me? So your level of consciousness shifts when you elevate yourself to a higher floor, to a higher consciousness. So think of it this way. The first floor is kind of like your 5 senses, really just what you can see and hear and taste and smell and feel. But your penthouse view is your God consciousness, right? This is where the mystical laws operate. It's way beyond your 5 senses. It's the difference between asking the question, what is the meaning of my life, which is very much a first floor question, and what is the meaning of life, which is a top floor question. Do you hear the difference? What's my life versus life? Now, this makes me think of years ago when David and I lived in Los Angeles. We actually lived in Venice near the beach, and that was our perspective, right? It's a small neighborhood. But every now and then, we would drive up Mulholland Drive into the Hollywood Hills, and from there, you can see the entire city's skyline and the basin there of Los Angeles. In fact, I'm sure you've seen it in movies and television many, many times, right? But we would never have known this from our first floor of Venice if we had not ever driven and explored a higher elevation. So here's another example. Like, what if you were in the lobby of the Empire State Building? Like, what would you be able to experience from the lobby of the Empire State Building as opposed to going all the way to the top, which is 102 floors? So if you think of each floor in the building metaphor as a level of consciousness, then you want to start asking yourself, what are you willing to do to elevate yourself to a higher consciousness? In other words, to go up to the penthouse, to expand your spiritual understanding, to expand your God understanding, to expand your idea of what the big picture is. Are you getting this? Are you with me? Because when you do this, this is the blueprint. This is the blueprint. And when you do this, an inner revolution is going to happen in all areas of your life, dopamine hit or not. And you're going to realize enough is enough. There is something happening in your life right now where that little inner voice, that little whisper is saying, enough is enough. Right? Like, I'm not going to do that thing anymore. I'm not going to say that thing anymore. I'm not going to be angry about that ancient history incident anymore. I'm not going to hold a grudge anymore. Enough. Enough. Right? So this could be about anything in your life. It could be a relationship, it might be your finances, it might be career, it might be your health. It could be any area of your life where that inner whisper is really trying to get your attention. So I want to hit the pause button here for a minute. You know, when I meet someone who's been sober for many, many years. And it could be any kind of addiction, right? It could be nicotine. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be, although alcohol is a drug, it could be food. It could be gambling. It could be shopping. Should I go on? It could be hoarding, right? It could be any kind of addiction. But when I meet someone who has been sober for many, many years, there's always a common thread, right, of that sobriety. And here's what it sounds like. Nothing comes before my sobriety. Nothing, right? Not a relationship, not my family, not even my dog, right? Nothing comes before my sobriety. And that's because they have reached a point in their life where they went from a first floor level of consciousness and what they thought they were capable of doing all the way to the penthouse view, and they learned to trust the experience of their higher power. Amen? Make sense? And this is why Carolyn May says, having to say, this is what I must accept, so be it. That can feel like chewing glass, right? But not being able to accept the things we cannot change is like having to actually swallow those shards of glass. And so whatever's going on in your life right now, I want you to know that you are stronger than you think. Trust me, you are stronger than you think. You're stronger than you think. Listen to the whispers. They are really trying to get your attention. And that little voice, that little whisper, that's God. By whatever name you know God. God doesn't call the qualified. God qualifies the called. Let's just say that together. God doesn't call the qualified. God qualifies the called. You know, in the Gospel of Matthew, our master teacher, Noesha, where Jesus speaks about this very frankly and directly when he says, don't be anxious about your life. Don't worry about your life. He says, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow thrown into the oven, will he not more clothe you, O you of little faith? Right? So I want to leave you with this. Have faith. Considering the lilies of the field, that is top floor penthouse consciousness. And so, as 2023 begins to come to a close over this next month, look, it's not too late. Look for the areas in your life where you are clearly hearing that God whisper, enough is enough. And when you discover it, empower yourself to have an inner revolution. That is what is yours to do, an inner revolution. Allow yourself to have a higher vision. Allow yourself to go to a higher floor. Allow yourself a higher consciousness. Because in the words of the great theologian Winnie the Pooh, you are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And so ends our message for today. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.